Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nache from NacheSnow.com. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed last week's episode 157, all about financial wellness. Lakay and I really tried to provide some helpful tips to help you guys set goals and become wealthy bosses. And there are a load of resources on that page. So if you haven't already listened to that episode, go to the show notes, which is at nachesnow.com/157. I think financial wellness is key. I've been preaching that from the beginning because I really do believe it's important for us as women to make sure that we have a good footing when it comes to our finances. Okay, so this week's episode is with Alison. You guys are going to absolutely love Alison. She was actually on episode 13 of the podcast, okay? OG. She is an OG. So listen to episode 13 to hear about her origin story. She is really someone who can talk about the evolution of going from working from somebody to opening their own business, being successful in that business, growing the amount of people that she has. And she is really passionate about what she does. Her company, MCE, is a change agent and it helps organizations, in particular art organizations, operate. So the consulting she does is very, very meaningful in the creative space. And today I have her on not to retell her story, but to talk a little bit about culture and how she's grown, cultivated, and ran a team. And so we talk about things from figuring out organizational culture to forecasting in your business. We talk about value alignment, hiring processes, orientation, when you have to let someone go, how to choose your clients. And we even get into like how you have to take care of yourself. And she gives some tips on how she takes care of herself and also how she continues to educate herself so she can make good decisions when it comes to her business. So I was going to split this up into two episodes, but I just decided to have it be a longer episode. And so hopefully this will take you into Thanksgiving because I'm not going to have an episode the week of Thanksgiving. Because if you've listened to the past couple of episodes with Kay and I, you know that I just purchased a house. And so my internet is going to be a little spotty. I have batch recorded and edited most of the episodes. There's a couple of episodes I just wasn't able to get to, just didn't have the capacity to do them. And so I'll have to do that once I'm up and running again with the internet. And anybody who has moved before, you know, sometimes you're up and running quickly and sometimes you're not. So I'm hoping that the week after Thanksgiving, I'll be back to business and give you a couple more episodes before the new year. So just bear with me because this is a little bit of a chaotic time. I try to work in advance as much as possible. Okay, so with that said, for the show notes for this page, remember you could go over to nachesnow.com/158. Remember, dreamsplansIdeas.com is the shop arm to my website. There I have the hard copy and the digital version of the Life Cleanse. It makes an excellent holiday gift for the person that you care about or yourself. I have you evaluate 10 areas of your life. And I am a person that really believes in reflection, like I've mentioned before. And so I really do stand by the journal that I've created, and it's helped me make big decisions like the decision to buy a house again, as I mentioned before in the other episode. I will stop there and jump into this episode. Just remember, if you enjoy this episode, it would mean so much to me if you went on Apple Podcasts and rated me 5 stars. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please give me a thumbs up. And wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, my friends. And of course, remember sharing is caring. Tag me on social if you end up sharing it on any social media account. Okay, let's get to Allison. I think you guys are going to be very inspired. Let's do this.
Hello, Allison. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, Nache. I'm so excited to be here. It's so crazy to believe it's been several years. I'm happy to be
Yeah.
here.
It's
Yeah.
insane. In the intro, I've just kind of like told them how amazing you were and how I talked to you back in March of 2017 and that they can like listen to kind of like your origin story. It's like a superhero.
Woo, the origin. Yes, that was a whole lifetime ago, it feels like.
Right.
I'm glad you add that context because it's important to see and understand people's journeys. Nothing happens overnight, and it is, in fact, a journey. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, it is because I think social media, and even if you're reading like magazines or articles, it feels like people are an overnight success, and it's nah.
Never, never. It's not possible. It's not possible. And when I think about my colleagues and where we are now, a lot of us, and where we were 20 years ago, it's like a lot of the conversations we were having about work, our first jobs, and what those jobs felt like, and oh, I don't like to do that, or whatever. And now we're in leadership roles, oftentimes having people that were once the people we were reporting to us. It's a huge adjustment, and then also just so great to see because you
Mm.
see just all of the people that you were coming up with doing amazing things, and it's so rewarding. Yeah.
So within the last 5 years, because I want to dig into all things about building teams, cultures, and so forth. Please just tell the listeners anything they need to know before we dig into that about where you were in 2017 and where you are with MCE now, and if MCE is the only company you're running and all of that good stuff, just so they're kind of like all caught up.
Okay, let's see. Let me see if I can do this. 2017, I got to think back, that year was life-changing in so many ways. In 2017, I had just opened MCE a year before that. So MCE launched March 2016. 2017, I was still a member of Third Eye Cultural Collaborative. It was this other company, this other venture that I had become a part of, I guess, 2 years before, where we were supporting the arts and culture sector, but in a slightly different way. It was three minds that were contributing to what we did and how we did it. And through that partnership, we all learned a lot about the work that we were doing, business, and just what sort of clients we actually wanted to serve. In 2022, I decided that I really wanted to focus my energies on MCE totally. And so at the end of 2021, I let my Third Eye partners know I'm ready to go in a different direction, always committed to the arts and culture sector, but I'm realizing that what I need to do and how I need to do it fits better under the MCE brand that I've created on my own. But, up through, I think the first quarter, was willing to support whatever projects we had ongoing. And so it was a very amicable decision, very okay, let's figure out what it means to pay you out. Let's figure out how to transition whatever role. It was the best, so responsible, mature. It was very, very easy. And I still talk to Angie and Jonas and definitely wish them the best and continue to send things their way as I hear what might be something that they might want to do. They actually are still working together. We even talked about that. What does it mean to have one of the three members of Third Eye leave? And it was
Oh,
just,
right, yeah.
it helped me see that you can have partnerships decide to go different ways and it can be pleasant and
Mm-hmm.
productive. 2017 also was the last year I worked for another company where I had a formal job. I had a full-time job the last time we spoke. And
Yeah.
most of that was because I was trying to figure out, like, do I need to start a business? What does it mean to start a business? And me being me, I wanted to make sure that I was very thoughtful in how I launched my own business so that it could literally support the lifestyle that I wanted to create for myself. So at the end of 2017, my mom passed away, which was another big catalyst for me deciding to leave my full-time job. It was one of those things that it's hard to describe what it's like to lose a parent.
Mm.
It is something that literally shakes you to your core and changes you forever. And while experiencing that change, I knew that I couldn't live my life the same. And so that meant a lot had to change. And part of that was like, all right,
Mm.
Allison, you want to do this business full time, so just jump, just see what would happen. And so I jumped. And at the time, MCE and Third Eye were there to support me. So I felt really good about that. And again, me being me, always open, always very self reflective about what life looks like, what it is that I want from life, and just who I wanted to work with. Those sorts of decisions helped to make me see that not only was I capable and prepared to run MCE on my own without running two businesses, but in order for me to build MCE in the way that I wanted it to, I had to devote all of my energy to my company. And so, yeah, and once I did
Wow.
that, Nache, I swear, the company took off. Like, full-time team, I mean, team members that I had one or two hires before that, but we went from having like maybe 2 to 3 hires in 2017 to 8 people that reported that were on the payroll in
Wow.
2022. And it was just like, what? And because I also had that as a reality, I needed to spend ample time focusing on organizational culture. And so
Mm, mm,
2020, like at the height of the pandemic, is when I really started to dig in to think about what does MCE's culture look like? Because before that, it was me and maybe someone that would help me schedule meetings. But in 2020, I started to bring in more people to do to work on some of the project work, collecting some of the data for our work. 2020, I introduced a new service offering to the
mm,
field, executive recruiting. So we needed people that had those skills.
mm,
And so it was imperative for me to figure out, okay, what does it mean to work at MCE? Versus
mm-hmm.
the last time we talked, I was thinking, what is MCE? Now it was
Right.
like, what is it like to work at MCE? So it was a real big shift. So much has happened. I could say, you know, uh, I could talk a little bit about, how even our clients have evolved. But I would say the organizational culture is the thing that
Is.
really cemented who we were and who we've
Mm-hmm.
become in the last several years.
Well, even, because I love how you began to talk about the different roles. But of course, some folks haven't re listened or listened to the original episode. So before I even ask the question about like what those roles look like, can you just tell the listeners a little bit about what MCE focuses on now, like
Oh,
business
sure.
of it, and then we can kind of go into how over the last 5 years you realized you needed X type of people in order to
Hmm.
support the company.
Sure, sure. So, MCE, I like to say, if you see MCE's name or my name too, but definitely MCE, it's in service to, well, let me say me first. It's always in service to creating a roadmap or removing a roadblock or highlighting blind spots that make it difficult for people to thrive in our sector. When I say people, I mean artists, arts administrators. And so for MCE, our company, we really work to improve company culture, reinvigorate program operations, ignite growth, and facilitate change all in the sector. And so we do that through two major service offerings: assessment and evaluation, which I know I
Mm,
talked a lot about the last time, and that still happens to be the line of our business that generates the most revenue. And assessment and evaluation is really primarily working with grant makers in the arts that have funded artist programs. And they're interested in figuring out, are our programs working the way that they were designed to? What's contributing to them working well? What might be hindering the success of those programs? And what's happened to the participants or the grantees that have participated in those programs? Whereas on the executive recruiting side, we're helping to place talent in organizations. And in this case, we're talking really about company culture, improving company culture, making sure that not only are organizations finding the right talent, but that the organizations are ready to embrace the leadership that they hire so that they are able to support the evolution of the companies that they come into. I think we started this work actually by a recommendation. Someone said, "Hey, we love the way that you do evaluation and how thoughtful you are. Would you be interested in exploring executive recruiting? We think you'll be great at it." And I was like, "What? Let me see." And before I make any decision, I always have to do my research, figure out what it means to do this work well. I have a few friends that work in executive recruiting for some of the major corporations like Korn Ferry and Deloitte, and there was a Facebook. So I spoke to their executive recruiting staff, trying to get a sense of what is it? How do y'all do it? And then I had to add the MCE sauce to it to make sure, or MCE magic, to make sure that it felt like an MCE experience. And so our executive recruiting is so much more than just finding you someone to work in your organization. It is helping the organization see where they are in their preparation for being ready to work with this talent, but also identifying real recruitment realities for hiring staff so that we can both manage their expectations on what is reasonable given their parameters like salary, their culture, all the things that people think about with working. And now, of course, remote work is a whole thing.
Oh,
So,
right.
but then also helping the candidates remember that the interview process is supposed to be mutually beneficial so that you're also thinking about what you need out of a company. So we try to be as transparent, that's one of our values, as we can on both ends, so that the placements that we make aren't just, we found this new talent, but this is someone that really understands our culture, fits in our culture, and we're ready to have them lead us in the way that we say we want to. So yeah,
That's
I'm not sure if that answered your question, but yeah.
it did. So question, because, and let me know if I got the numbers wrong, but I think you said you had about 2-ish folks and you went to about 8-ish folks, right? And
Yeah.
so as you increase folks, of course, that increases salary, right? Like that you have to
Yes.
pay for.
Yes.
And so how do you balance that, and how did you over the last 5 years? Because you had this, right, new business area you're thinking about going into. So I'm assuming you're like, okay, I need to hire people in order to support that area. But it's like the income isn't coming in yet. So it's like the chicken or the egg, right? Do you take the risk of hiring the person knowing that the money is coming? Like, how did you assess that and figure all of that out?
Well, so what I do, and this is, I think, a great practice for any entrepreneur and probably some that many uses. I do a lot of forecasting with my business that is trying to predict when I'll have client work and when I won't, or when I'll know I'll be in a heavy business development season that will help me figure out what sort of talent I need so that I can then be thoughtful about staffing or hiring. And so at the beginning of the year, I'll have some clear, I mean, of course, things happen throughout the year that change that, but I'll have some clear ideas of the type of work that we have going into the year. And I will detail what those hours might look like per the type of staff member that might contribute to the team. And then that will help me determine who needs to be on what team, or how much work they might have to do on a team, and then even figuring out what level of talent contributes to the project teams. Since we've evolved in our team composition, I now say each MCE project has at least 3 people, if not
Mm.
4. There's usually a project manager, there's usually a project coordinator. Always on all teams, there's a project manager and a project coordinator. Then, depending on if it's executive recruiting, there'll be someone working in the talent acquisition part, like navigating the resumes. And then there'll be someone else working on creating the job description and working with the search committees to help plan for the project. On the assessment and the evaluation side, of course, there's always a project manager, project coordinator, and then there are people that help support the design of the instruments that we use. Or sorry, let me say assessment and evaluation, there's always a project coordinator, project manager, a research assistant, and then other people that will help collect the data. And so the way that I staff our evaluation projects in particular, they're usually staffed by people that have expertise in the discipline that we're supporting. I kind of call it like a jazz band. Like, so I'll pull people for projects based on their interests. So the consultants that we have on our team are contractors that have a distinct focus area in the field. And so they'll be, so if it's a classical music evaluation, I'll bring people on that team that have that specific background. Or if the evaluation is focused in a certain, in theater, there'll be theater consultants that support the design of that project. Meanwhile, the people that are standard, the research assistant, the project coordinator, and the project manager, they work to make sure the project runs smoothly. And then all of us come together in team meetings to strategize together, no one person having authority or priority over the others, because without each person, we can't do the work. It literally is like a band. That's how I think about it, like a jazz band. So maybe for a project focused in theater, the theater person might be on trumpet or something, but you need the research assistant to be playing the drum to crunch the data. You need the piano player to be scheduling, or the piano player or the project coordinator to be making sure all the scheduling is happening. And maybe you need the saxophonist, who might be the project manager, to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. So everyone has a very distinct role. And so when projects start, I think about who on the team can serve which role really well, and how then to introduce those roles in our very first meeting. So as we move through the project, everybody's pretty clear on what role they'll serve.
So it's interesting, like, to get a little, like a one even layer deep, take out the flakes a little bit, dig into the croissant.
Right.
So, you know, I know some listeners out there is, oh my God, that's what I need to do. My company is in disarray and I feel like I don't know what's going on and I need some organization and I need to start forecasting at the beginning of the year. How does Alison do this? Does she write it on a piece of paper? Does she use software? Like, how do you organize all the pieces? So any advice for people who feel like they're just unorganized?
I have 2 Excel spreadsheets that I look at every month. Well, 2 Excel spreadsheets that I look at regularly, and then another that I look at quarterly. One Excel spreadsheet has the forecast of project by month. It's monthly and then quarterly. So I know first, when does the money come in? Like, when will how much can I expect from each project each month, and then by quarter. That also gives me a running tab of what's going on in our business. All of this is in QuickBooks too, but I still need my Excel spreadsheet. The other part is directly related to that spreadsheet in that it's a labor forecast. So I have the revenue forecast, which is the one that I talked about before, where I can see when money is coming in. So I might say, oh, March, we're going to get a great lump of change. Well, we might not get that same lump again until maybe June. Maybe there'll be sprinkles of other things, but I can tell based on the payment schedule when I can expect certain income. And that also lets me know that I can pay people, because I have our payment schedules are phased. So we always take a deposit and then we phase the rest of the payments based on how long the projects are. Another thing that was different, just really quickly, in 2017 is our projects weren't as long. Maybe they were 3 to 9 months. Now our projects go from 6 to 3 years. And I can predict in a more way, all with everything being equal, no termination of contract,
Right.
that certain money will be coming in. Then I think, okay, I know based on the scope of the project, for instance, maybe March is going to be a busy time on this project. So then I know from a labor standpoint, meaning the people I staff on the projects, these people are going to be really busy in March or June, just depending on what's happening in the project. I get a good idea of how busy the work is going to be so that I can figure out who I can staff on which project. Because I also don't want to burn anybody out.
Right.
Everybody on our team will tell you, I'm like, don't nobody need to be burnt out doing this work. Like, it's so serious, but it's also not supposed to be at your detriment, like working so hard that you can't do anything else or whatever. So, in order for me to make sure that's possible, I have to be organized or
Yeah.
intentional about how people are staffed on projects. So, we might have people working on 2 to 3 projects, but when they're working will differ because of how the projects are running. I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think this will hit home and resonate for people because they are looking for a way to figure out how to plan projects or how to determine if they can even hire more people, right? And
Yeah.
what you've outlined, I feel like will allow them to do it. And if they've never done it before, I'm sure there's lots of resources out there that can teach them how to do it, right? Maybe something on LinkedIn Learning or
Mm-hmm.
Google or what have you. If they're like, woo, this sounds great, but where do I even get started? I'm scared of Excel,
Yeah.
right?
Right. I had a cheat sheet because I was a research director at a consulting firm before I started my own consulting firm. And so I'm essentially doing for MCE what I had to do when I worked as a research director. And I used to always say, oh my gosh, this is so much because I had to find the work, staff the work, and then work with the clients to make sure that everybody was happy, and also our finance director. That's essentially what I'm doing now, except I'm doing it for myself. And when I'm not working with our research director, I'm working with our accountant. I'm not working with staff of that company, I'm working with the team members of MCE. So that was definitely a cheat sheet that I had ahead of time. And then I think the way that my mind works, I'm so analytical. I like details. And so I'm like, okay, in order for me to make sure that I can pay people, I need to know how much time I can, especially if they're contractors, how much time I can say I can pay them so that they want to take on the project, but also what value it will be for them. And I think that one of the other things I learned while creating our org culture is that pay is important. And I did a lot of research on how much to pay people so that it would be competitive for our sector and for the type of work that they did. Because I wanted people to be paid a living wage, not just a fair wage, but something that they could. So it goes beyond like,
Yeah.
oh, our rates, what I am able to pay because of how I staff our projects seem to be satisfactory. I actually did a team engagement survey for the first time in June because I was like, MCE is always doing these evaluations where we're asking organizations to reflect on who they are. Who
You
are
like
we?
that?
What are we? Like, how do things land for people? Like, I hear regularly because I am so big on feedback. I hear what people have to say about what it's like to work on the team, but I wanted to see if we created a space for it to be completely anonymous and for people to say how they felt, what would people say? And one of the questions, we asked a lot of questions because, we need to know. And that was through the support of an HR consultant that I hired. But one of the questions, there were several questions that the answers brought me joy. But one was, do you feel like you're compensated well for working at MCE? And everybody, there were 8 responses, said yes. And so I was like, that is
Thank you,
so,
goodness.
because in
But
the
it was the work
arts,
you did, right? On your Excel sheet, the research on how much you should pay folks. So people, don't be afraid of Excel, QuickBooks, Airtable, Notion, whatever your,
yep,
your choice
yep.
is for collecting and evaluating that data because I feel like the work you put in allowed for you to get a positive response for that answer, right? Because you made
Yeah.
sure that you were being competitive when you were paying your folks.
It's that, and I think it's also the other question that just really still I sit in gratitude when I think about the responses. And that was the question that said, choose 3 words that describe what it's like to work at MCE. And people, again, anonymously just said all of the things that were so critical for me when creating our culture. I remember working in arts and culture organizations and feeling stifled or feeling abused or feeling unheard or unseen or not challenged. And these team members had a very different experience working at MCE. They said things like, I feel inspired. I feel like it's community. I feel like I'm constantly learning. I feel challenged to be better. I feel like my humanity is respected. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. It just was so, and those are just some of the things that came up. But it's just like, I was so deliberate in trying to.
How did you do it? How do you feel like you were able to create that culture?
Well, I think we have very clear values: compassion, curiosity, and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And so and people said that another question was like, do you feel like we live our values? And people were like, yeah, both with each other and with our clients. And so I think being really clear on what those values mean
Mm-hmm.
in actuality and delivery and performance helped me see in the hiring process if people would fit in our culture. So there are
Mm.
questions. They always say there's the technical questions to see if people have the technical skill to perform the job. And then there are the questions that you ask, and this is why I think we do a good job with recruiting. They're the questions that you ask that assess value alignment. Are you compassionate maybe when someone misses a deadline, but you don't understand why? Are you more willing to jump to curiosity? Hey, I wonder what happened. Are they okay? Let me
Mm.
just check in. Or are you like, they messed up my work. It's all their fault. Are you more willing to blame? Because the truth is, in addition to living through a whole pandemic, people are just people, just trying to
That is
navigate
true.
life. So
That is true.
how are you willing to engage with people? Are you transparent in how
Mm.
you talk to people and describing what you need and setting clarity around your own limitations? Like, because I could have a whole idea of what I think needs to happen because it's my company. Okay, we need to do this, that, the other thing, or whatever. And then people knowing who they are, they're like, Allison, I don't know about that. I hear you, but let's talk through if that's actually possible, given where and I'm like, oh. And because I hire people that I believe I can trust, I
Yeah.
listen. And so
Mm-hmm.
then if what they suggest creates the opportunity for us to meet whatever goal we're trying to meet, and it's not my idea, I'm like, let's do it. If it
Let's
works,
go for
fine.
it.
I'm not up in here trying to create oppression. I just want to get
Right.
whatever it is done. And so
But let me
that
ask
can
you,
only be done when you have values alignment, I think.
yeah. And so for you, let's say there's a listener out there and they want to increase the staff in their company. How do you hire? Do you go have an outside firm do it and you tell them like the questions or the assessment that you want them to do? Did you go through LinkedIn? Like, how do you find the people and interview the people and assess the people to make sure they can not only do they have the tradecraft to do the work you need them to do, but then that they're values kind of align with the companies.
Well, I don't do it alone. There's usually at least one other, we do it internally. So I'll say that first. There's usually at least one other staff member that's a part of the interview process that is aware of how we work and could get a sense of if the applicant or candidate could fit into how we work. So they
Mm,
usually might do the first round of interviews, and then we'll have a shared agreement around the types of questions we're going to ask depending on the role,
mm.
and then that person will do interviews, and then they'll write up their thoughts, and then we'll talk about what do you think. they seem like they might be able to do the work, but I don't know about whatever. And so
Mm,
I'll listen to their perspectives because I believe, and this is something that the group has said to me, everybody has a certain commitment to this work and they all they come with a certain level of something, je ne sais quoi, about how they work with each other. And so you can kind of tell, it's not 100% accurate, but you can tell if that's going to be the case in the first few conversations when we
mm,
hire slow. So they're usually 3 interviews. Maybe the first one is like a short interview, maybe 30 minutes, just to see, hey, are you still interested? Like some basic questions. The second, if the team member is like, oh, this can be a great fit, then I'll meet with them and we'll just talk about. I spend a lot of time talking about what it's like to work at MCE.
mm,
Well, and we will also, if it feels like if I feel good about that conversation, then we'll take another conversation to talk about what you actually have to do the work. So I
mm.
can see, so now I have a sense of if it's an alignment fit and a skill fit. And then if I'm like, yes, and I'm like at a point where I want to make an offer, then I'll say, do you want to talk to people in our team so that you're not just maybe you talk to someone as a part of the entry, but maybe someone that would be on the team that you're working on so that you can ask them the questions that maybe you didn't ask me or you want to, whatever feels right for you, so that they
Mhm.
can also, again, practicing what we're preaching, it's not just me trying to find someone, it's also someone else feeling like, okay, this is a place for me. So then the person
Mhm.
has an opportunity to speak to to whoever. And then maybe depending on on the skill that I'm hiring for, there'll be a component or an element where there's some sort of quick task that the individual might find themselves in so that they can get a sense of what it's like. This is usually, I think, the third round. They can get a sense of what it's like to be at MCE. So like
Mm.
our project coordinator, we were excited about, because okay, the person that is in the project coordinator role now took over the role of our last team member, because we've
Mhm.
had team members evolve out too. And so that team member was a part of her interview process. And we basically said,
Mm.
hey, when you're going to join as a part of this part of the interview, you're joining a client meeting. And your role in the client meeting will be to take notes, to write up the notes, or something like that. So we want to just see how you do, because this is
Mhm.
literally what it'll be like. And so if you're like, I don't want to take minutes, I don't want to be, that's not what I'm looking for, then you will know really clear or
Like this
quickly
is
if this
not
is for
for
you.
me. Right.
And so, and then we will know when we see what they produce if the level of detail is closely aligned to the type of information we want captured in notes. We want to just see what people would naturally do. Now, it doesn't mean it needs to be perfect, but it means that they're listening for things that would be mindful for our operation. And I'll have to
Mm.
say, this process happened over a period of time. It wasn't
Mhm.
like this at the beginning. The first few times I did interviews, listen, the first person I hired was my cousin's friend's daughter. She was on, her name was Kelsey. She was on Christmas break and needed something to do, and I needed some help with something. And then it was literally like, oh yeah, come on in. You're interested in the arts, you work in dance? Okay, cool. That's what it was the very first time. Maybe by the third hire, it was like, well, let me let you know what I need, and let's hear about what you're looking for in a job. Now, the evolve process is way more intentional and designed to both assess values alignment and
Mhm.
technical skill.
Now, do you do the same process for contractors too, or because
Yep,
maybe you need them?
everybody,
Okay, so across the board
everybody.
to make sure
And it's so
everybody on
funny.
the team, okay, is a good
Yep, it's
fit.
funny because I have two contractors that I hired in July, because everybody will go through. Oh, well, let me say this. The two contractors I hired in July, well, let me say this instead. The two contractors I hired in July, we had a very similar conversation. They did not speak to the entire team because
Mm.
what I was asking them to do was kind of be like the trumpet player. And so what I needed to know is they had the skill set to do whatever was necessary for their role on the team.
Mm.
Once they came on the team, everybody has to go through an evaluation, orientation. And the orientation is the same regardless of if you're an employee or a contractor. And it just talks about what it's like to work in our space, what it's like to live
Mhm.
our values. We have a cultural symbol, which is a piece of vinyl, and it is a circle on purpose because it acknowledges that each person represents a different line in that circle. And each
Mm.
person, the whole album is made up of all of those different songs. So no one person is out here on their own. Like we all are a part of it. So for the contractors, it's slightly different, but I want to say one contractor that I hired in July, she was like, I have never had this experience being welcome to a team. Like, usually they're like, here's your task,
We
go
need
do it.
this,
And I'm
do
like,
it.
yeah. And I'm like, well, because our teams work so collaboratively, it's important that you understand how we work so that you can jump in and get on the good foot, if you will.
Yeah,
And it
and I love
helps.
oh, I was just gonna say I love too that you said that there's an orientation. So I wanted people to
Mm-hmm.
key in on that, and everybody goes through this orientation, right?
Everybody, it's an hour long. We talk about what MCE is, why MCE exists, what our current projects are, and then we talk about logistics around what it means to time off or holidays, communication. I also go over the measurements of success because we
Mm,
each talk about that too. Have check-ins just to see how things are going and how I feel about how things are going and how you feel about how things are going. So I let people
mm,
know what their measurements of success will be during the orientation so they know what they will be expected to do in order to stay on the team. And then we talk about the project that they've been hired for and where they can find all of their materials. And by that time, they will have signed on all of their agreements and W-9s and all that stuff. And yeah, and we go over the operation. We have an operations manual that talks about how we work.
mm,
There are training videos in there so people know how to use our systems. And
mm.
it's meant to, again, I just want people to feel like they don't have to feel like they're out here trying to figure it out in the Hunger Games of life. Like, where's this resource? Who need? You can literally find whatever you need either in the manual or you can ask someone on the team or you can ask me.
I think all this is key. And, what I want people to hear too is even though this isn't a company of 5,000 people, the resources that you might get from a company that has 5,000 people, you are getting with a small company of 8 or 9 people. And I feel like that's key because sometimes people think, oh, because my company isn't 500 people or 3,000 people, I don't need to invest in the resources that it takes in order to build good culture and a good team. But I think what you're proving in this conversation is it pays off, right? And you
It
have kind
really
of
pays off.
surveys to prove it too. Yeah.
And I think that, and all honestly, all of this is being done because of what I think would be helpful if I were working on a team. I always have
Mhm.
questions. I need to know what's going on. Or I've been in organizations that didn't have this level of detail, and I was like, I don't know where, I don't know what. And so the other thing I want to name is I was working with last fall, I worked with a leadership coach named Yvette Angelique Adams, and she introduced the notion of all staff meetings. Because before we would just have project team meetings. Whoever's working on
Mm.
a project will meet together. And I just have to give you a little plug because I invited you to come to one of our all staff meetings to talk about time management, organization. And Yvette, when I worked with Yvette, she introduced the idea that people from across the organization might want to meet and talk about what was happening around the company. And for me, I was thinking, do they? Like, project team meetings happen monthly. It's great. But I had no idea that the entire team would want to connect and chat.
Mm.
And so what we did when we launched those, I want to say it was last summer, not only did we have updates on what was happening on the contracts, we also had a exercise for getting to know you because if you're on a project team, you know the people on your team because you meet with them monthly. But for those that wanted to know each other across the company, there was some sort of game or some activity that each person would be responsible for organizing from month to month, and that helped facilitate engagement. I mean, we're a remote organization, so how do you can't it you have to take time to connect and be intentional for that. And I thank Yvette for bringing that idea up to me. So we had the all staff meetings first, and then she's like, well, maybe you can have a retreat. And I was like, me? A retreat? Like, that sounded like like a real company. Like, we can't have a retreat. Like, what? Like, our team members work all around the nation: California, New
Right.
York, Arkansas, Virginia, Maryland. I was like, what, DC? And I was like, we could bring everybody together. But so I did the very first virtual retreat during one of the staff meetings. I said I wanted to, and this is something that I think is also helpful for people to hear, that maybe they can't pay whatever they think they need to pay, but sometimes what it feels like to work at the organization is also something that keeps people connected. And so we would have a meditation practitioner come in and teach us how to meditate, or someone come and I ask people, what sort of support would you like to support your own navigation of life? And this has nothing to do with MCE, but just you. Like, so someone said
Well-being.
time management. And so I was like, hey, Nache, would you be interested in coming to chat with our team about time management and productivity? And because that was something that I heard that was interested. And so we did that too over the last year. We had a virtual retreat in, I think, the summer. And then I think we had you come in maybe, I don't know if it was December. I can't remember when you
Yeah, that
came in.
was, yeah, I don't remember either. It was like,
Was it
yeah,
COVID?
God, it feels like, I got COVID brain. This is COVID time. I'm like, when was that? It was,
Um,
I,
but then we had at the end of the year we had a holiday celebration, virtual celebration, where everybody brought in their favorite holiday song. We talked about why it was their favorite holiday song. I sent food out. Well, I gave everybody, not me, someone on the team made sure that a gift card, a Uber gift card, was sent to everyone so that they could order their favorite breakfast. Then we ate that together while we talked about our favorite Christmas songs. And then I went over the following year's goals with the entire team in the spirit of transparency, just saying, look, this is where I hope we can go as a team. And actually, I did that because someone on the team was interested.
oh,
They
yeah.
were like,
It's listening to the
oh, I
people.
know I work on these two projects, but I'm just curious, what's the goals for the company? Like, where are we going? And I was like, y'all want to know? Like, I didn't think that people wanted to know, but again, that was my own learning. And if
Yeah.
people feeling comfortable enough to say, I'd like to hear this. And so then I'm like, well, let me share it. And so here's where we'd like to go. Here's how I think we might do that. Here are some of the changes we'll be making as a result. Just like with the team engagement survey, I sent a note in our project management tool, Asana, saying, hey, here's a survey meant to gather your feedback on what it's like to work here. I am administering it anonymously, so I don't know who will say what, but I am committed to sharing the results with everyone and then letting you know what that means given what I hear. And so they were
Yeah.
like, okay. So in June, I think it was our June meeting, we had that meeting where I shared with them what people had to say. Also, there were some points around the meeting scheduling, because people are all around the country and they may have other things that they're working on. Like, what does it mean to schedule meetings in a way that takes into account the various time zones? And so that made me think, okay, this is a learning for me. So, like, just as I was fed and filled with gratitude because of the things around compensation or living our values or what it's like to work here, I learned from listening to the team that our team meetings, maybe when they happen, the timing of them might need to be tweaked a little. I also learned that, there might be a time now where we need to restructure our teams in a different way, wherein maybe the evaluator role on the evaluation project team needs to be something that's more standard across all projects versus a project here and there, which is getting into the details of how I run the business. But like I talked a little bit about staffing earlier. And so it's okay. So I'm listening to what people are saying. And I told them, one, thank you for being honest. And then two, in the next 6 months, we're going to be exploring what that means for our team makeup. And so there will be changes in the team. Maybe some people will stay in the same role. Maybe there'll be new people coming in different roles, and maybe some people leaving. And so I should also mention that our team dynamic has changed. We've had people leave, we've had new people come, and we have our happy hour toast when people leave just to acknowledge the contributions they made to the team. And because people, depending on where they work on the projects, will work closely with their team member, just wanted to acknowledge their contributions versus it being like, oh, you're leaving? Fine, be gone.
Bye. Right.
It's
Well,
like, no. And it's only 30 minutes, but it's something just to honor the time that they've shared with the team, with the organization.
another thing, that sometimes people are a bit fearful of, especially when growing a team, is when a teammate doesn't fit. There's a saying to hire slow, fire fast. How
Mm-hmm.
have you navigated that when someone has gone through all the checks, but it is super clear in the
Yeah.
beginning, that they're not the right fit? Any kind of advice for
Yeah.
people out
I
there?
did, and I did go through that, which is why I said it's not 100% accurate because in this case it wasn't. This case, I was hiring someone that I thought could support our work in a more management role, just to support some of the work that I was doing on the projects. And they seemingly were values aligned. And I thought technically, or I should say, I'm sure skilled technically because they'd been doing it before they got to MCE. But what I learned is what they were producing didn't fit what I'm comfortable sharing with our clients. So it was taking me much more time to review, make edits, provide
Mm,
feedback to them on their work. I
mm-hmm.
really appreciated how they engaged with the team. I thought that they were very committed to the type of work we were trying to do. I just didn't think the technical skill that I needed was matching the pay that I was giving them. And the first time I witnessed it, I was like, let me have a quick conversation out of curiosity to see, one, did they truly understand the assignment and what their thinking was to produce what they gave me. Then I heard what they
Mm,
had to say. I gave them some feedback to see how to maybe make it more on the same page, so that maybe if they were going A and maybe if they were going left, I needed to go right, I could tell them how to close that gap. That was the first, I guess, checkpoint. The second time I gave them something else, and it was the same sort of,
mm,
I just was like, this product is going to require way too much work on my part. It's just not going to work. So
mm-hmm.
I was torn because in many ways they fit our culture. Were committed to the work, but their work product was too expensive
Yeah.
to not be where I needed it to be. So I said, and I don't know if this was the best decision, but this is what I did. I said, what I've witnessed in your output is slightly different than what I expected when I hired you. And
Mm-hmm.
it's seemingly requiring me to take a lot more time to support your efforts. And because of that, now we're talking about your time being spent and mine, which costs the company more. So we have two
Mm-hmm.
options that we can navigate through here, in my opinion. We can either, I'll pay you less and you can get up to, because I do have people on the team that are growing as they do the work,
Mm.
but I pay them according to where they are in their skill set. So I said we could change your pay so that it doesn't cost me as much, or we might need to decide that this is not a good fit for you at this time.
Mm.
So think about which one works. And the pay difference was probably significant enough for them to say, no, not it was significant enough for them to say, yeah, I didn't realize that what I was producing was that far off. And while I appreciate the interest to keep me around so that I can get to where it is that you'd like, I just think we should probably just end this arrangement. And maybe something else comes on another project, maybe it'll be a better fit or whatever. And so it
Yeah.
was like one of those things where I let them know what I thought and what I needed, gave them feedback, gave them another opportunity to produce what I thought was necessary. When it didn't work, I don't know if this was the best decision, but the other part of it is that this person was a good team member. So I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to lose a good team member. But if the thing is, if the work is not up to what I consider MCE standards, something's got to change. And so that's how I handled that one.
No, that's
I
good.
don't know if I would do that the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I would just be like, yeah, it's not going to work and not give an option, but
But but
that's what I
but there
did
was
then.
like mitigating circumstances, like the person was a good fit culturally and sounded like a hard worker. It just wasn't up to standards you needed to be. So you were willing to help that person grow. Where then there
Hmm.
will be other situations where both it's just not a fit, right? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so
You just got to say, yeah. And I did have to say, I had to say that to a contractor once who, given where they were in their career, I thought that the transition would be more seamless and it just wasn't. And
mm-hmm.
we didn't have the time to do all of to make all the accommodations I was willing to in the last situation. So we just had to say, yeah, just
Sorry.
not this
Yeah.
time.
Time
Yeah,
is
and
money.
it's hard to have that because it's expensive all the way around. It's
Yeah.
expensive for me to have to put in the extra time to support, but for the right people, I'm willing to do that. But if you're at a
Mm-hmm.
stage in your career where this sort of thing should be nipped in the bud, then it's probably just not a good fit. So,
Yeah, and I would tell people too, it never feels good to have difficult conversations and to deliver feedback or to tell someone that they can no longer work for you, but you have to do it because I've
yeah.
heard too many stories and seen too many cases where people are too afraid or fearful to say something. It's just too uncomfortable for
Yeah.
them. But then it's just that's terrible because it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of their time because they're doing something that's not up to your standards. Just all around, it's a bad situation. Rip off the band aid, my friends. Even though it's an
Yes.
uncomfortable situation, practice what you're going to say and just do it. Don't shy away from it. Don't have someone else do it. Like you got to get better at those things, and that it actually helps you grow as a person.
It does. And I heard you mention, and I think I said it too, it's like your standards. When you're really clear about what your standards are
Mm-hmm.
and you see that there's a disconnect, then you got to trust what you see and say, okay, what are the steps that I need to take in order to do this with compassion and curiosity and transparency for us? Because it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, what is happening? What can be,
Right.
how can this be handled? What's realistic? How would I want to experience this sort of news? I think it's also this work that we do, there's a technical skill, but it is the way that we do it. When people think about who they want to work with, and we talked about this in our first conversation, we were talking about brand, they think about what it's like to work with you. And so
Mm-hmm.
consulting is we have the technical skill of recruiting or assessment evaluation, but consulting as a skill is something that creates an environment where people, the client, feels seen, heard, valued, respected, but
Mm-hmm.
also understands that you'll tell them the truth. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is a happy dance between holding space for the goal at hand,
Mm-hmm.
managing expectations, pushing back, scope creep, all of that. And so project managers at MCE need to be comfortable with doing that kind of work, which is very
Mm-hmm.
different than maybe analyzing data or collecting data. All of it is valuable, but it's very different. And so,
Yeah. And
um,
And I'll tell people to also make sure that you are documenting things, because there will be some people that are going to push back and say, like, well, this isn't the case and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So it's really good to document the work that they're doing and when they're not doing the work, and when you give them feedback, documenting that too in writing.
Yep.
So
it's one of the reasons why we have those regular check-ins, so that
right.
people never have to all of a sudden hear, well, wait, what did I do? It's like,
What?
no, we talked about this.
Right.
But even further, because of your orientation, that these are the 5 areas that you're actively being thought about, that I'm actively considering as you are a member of our team. And so if any of them are ever in a space where I think there's a conversation that needs to be had, we're going to talk about it. Yeah. And I expect that people will come to me with the same sort of, you know what, Allison, when you sent me that email, I just wasn't sure how to receive it. Like, whatever needs to be said. I had a conversation with a team member who felt like a request that I asked of them was too close to a timing of something else. And so they were like, I need you to help me understand which one is the priority. And I was like, oh, okay. And so we talked about it, but I wouldn't have even known that. I would have just thought, you just go make it happen. But
right.
You have to feel like, it's important to me that you feel like, now it's a delicate balance, because I do have expectations, standards of excellence, and I want people to show up as their authentic self, which means if you need to be heard or talk about something that doesn't feel right, you should feel comfortable to say something, just as I will too. And while doing that, it's important to me to come away from the conversation with a resolution, even if the resolution is, we disagree, but this is how we're going to proceed. Because it's just, at the end of the day, MCE is held to a standard, and that's what we have to work in service to, if you will. But like, it's been fascinating to work with people, because people management is a whole other thing.
It's a whole, and that's why I'm glad we're like digging into this, because there are solo entrepreneurs, but then there are entrepreneurs that want to have a small business and manage people. And so I don't want people to be afraid of doing that, because when you scale, you're able to do more because you're not doing everything yourself. But at least they're going into it eyes wide open with some amazing tips from you. So one more question before we get to the wrap-up questions, and I see I'm probably going to have this as like a 2-part episode, people. But
people management is a whole.
It's a whole thing. But
it's why I got to take my quarterly vacations. Otherwise, I don't know how I would do this.
But one thing that I wanted to cover with you before we wrapped up was, you said your clients changed in the last 5 years. I think that we were talking about this before we got on, started recording it. And if you could just talk about that, because I think sometimes people are just like, I will just take anyone who will give me money, and maybe that's good at the beginning.
Yeah.
But how has that changed for you as far as picking clients?
We use the same values when we're in conversation with potential clients, because of the way that we work, because we believe in being transparent and taking you on the journey with us, so that it's not, you hire MCE, they take the task, go away, and then you get the product. It's important for our clients to understand that's how we work, because they need to understand that's what they're looking for. And so if it's not, then that means that it probably won't be a good fit working with us. From executive recruiting to assessment evaluation, we have monthly meetings with our clients to let them know what's going on. Again, that's the transparency piece. And maybe some people are like, we don't have time for all these meetings, we just want you to do it and be out. Or like when we're talking to them about what it is they're hoping to have accomplished, I listen very clearly about how they work with each other, what they expect, the timeline, the budget. All of that helps me figure out, are they willing to
He's like, you've been on this phone call way too long, and I need some love.
She's like, And then I was quiet for about an hour. But after about an hour, we got to talk about some things. But yeah, it's just because depending on how people interact with each other, they may bring their way to our space, and we being MCE purposefully interact in a very specific way. And so oftentimes when we're talking about the work, talking about their needs, talking about their timeline and budget, I can get a sense of if that fits with us. And I'm also very clear with them about how we work, because they may be like, ain't nobody trying to do all that, just do this work and be done. And I found that when we take the time that we do, the outcome is better all the way around. And what I think is really interesting, particularly with evaluation in the arts in particular, a lot of people and grant makers are interested in sharing the great story about what happened because they gave this money, and like all of our artists are doing amazingly well. And our evaluations tend to be a bit more comprehensive, where we look at how the artists are doing, but also what the programming team did to contribute to that success or maybe hinder the success. And so our reports are incredibly informational, instructional, but they may not always be the PR pieces that people are looking for to give a splash heads up about what's going on on the program. And so specifically for our evaluation work, I asked them, why are you getting this evaluation done? Are you interested in change if the data shows that there's room for it? Do you need to tell your funder that this is going well? Like, what is it? Because then I'll also be able to get a sense of if they can, quote unquote, handle the truth, or if they just need a good story. And for us, because we're, like I said earlier, about improving company culture, igniting and facilitating change, and reinvigorating program operations, sometimes that means that change happens. And that story might not always be a light and fluffy story. That doesn't mean that it's not insightful, thorough, instructive, but it does mean that now it's going to be nice. It's going to be designed well. It's going to be formatted well. It's going to be a mixture of visuals and narrative. But it's important to me to hear that a client is willing to receive that feedback, because that's how we work. And so one of our clients, the League of American Orchestras, after they got finished with our evaluation, and this was one of the best compliments that I think we could have gotten from a client, and she said, MCE helped us learn that what comes out from the evaluation is not good or bad. It just is something that can help us understand what we're doing well, and other things that can help us reach our goal better. And it's not, you did this wrong, it's more like, if you want to achieve this goal, these are the steps that might help you get there, or these are the steps that may be preventing you from getting there. And so it's like recognizing that framing supports program delivery, and ultimately we're about creating a better experience for artists in the sector. And that sort of feedback was monumental for me. Like, I was like, exactly, because they changed the next variation of the program was informed by a lot of what we came up with. Now, that particular client also hired someone separately to create the guides that look good, but also tell a story that maybe someone else might be able to pick up and look at. But our evaluation helped the internal team figure out what they need to do to ensure that their project is meeting its goals. I hope that's making sense.
Yeah, it does. That is perfect. Yes.
Okay, so and so if you're like, we just want the flashy story, I don't know what the data is going to say, so I can't tell you for sure that a flashy story will come from it. And we're not even a flashy sort of company. We'll tell you what's going on, but yeah.
And I like that you, from the start, you make sure that the client understands your expectations, how you work, and they can determine if it works for them or not, right? Monthly meetings, how you go about your evaluations. And so there are no surprises, right?
Yep.
So
One
no,
of the things I had to learn the hard way is one of our very first evaluations, we did not share in a I guess expansive way some of the things that we were learning along the way. So
Mm.
when they got the report, they were like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't expect to see this." So what we started to do, because the data is the data, we're not changing it. That's a part of our integrity. But if there are things that come up along the way, we share that depending on the type of evaluation it is. So people kind of get a sense of that when they get the report, they pretty much know what's going to be in it. They're just
Mm.
looking at it in a way that maybe they hadn't. Because I recognize that everybody doesn't want to read a whole bunch of narratives. So we have
Right.
figures and tables and charts. And so, yeah.
This has been wonderful. A couple
Oh,
of
thank
wrap up
you.
questions. How do you stay organized? Do you have any tools, software, or techniques for the people?
Yes, I love Asana for project management. I have been singing their praises for a minute. Google Drive is how we share all our folders, and I love Dipsado for
Mm.
client management, Books for accounting. Our team, this is another thing that I was like, I don't want to do this, but it worked for them. Slack, we now have Slack channels for projects
Oh,
so
interesting.
that they can communicate quickly. And that seems to be really working well, really on our executive recruiting team, where they are having regular conversations around what's happening. I'm trying to think of other tools. We use Loom videos like there's nobody business. We use
Oh,
those for
yeah.
training so that we don't have to, everybody that comes on board, we're not walking them through every single set of logistics, but we'll have like a 5-minute video that tells them how to use Asana or how to charge their time or how
Mm.
to, what else is there a little video for? There's one for Asana, there's one for how to charge their time. I think those are the two. Is there something else? I just asked someone on our team to create a manual to start documenting some of our processes because
Mm.
while our
SOPs. Yeah.
design is set based on what's in the contract, the steps that the team goes by to use it is very specific. So I asked someone to start working on that. So we'll have that done probably next month sometime. We use MailChimp for our newsletters,
Mm. Yeah.
Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn for social media. Yeah. And
Yeah.
other thing
That's
that keep me organized is quarterly vacations. Like I need time away from
Yes.
MCE. It's critical. Without it,
Yeah.
nobody benefits. The
Kudos to
team
you for
means
sticking with that.
March, June, August, and December are quarterly vacation months. And it is, I
Yes.
think my body just happens to know like when it's time because things will start bubbling up and I'm like, I need a vacation. Oh, it's coming. Like it's for my own creativity and for my own ability to think strategically about what's coming. It's
Hmm.
very easy for me to get lost in all there is to run a company because there's the culture slash team management, there's the accounting, HR, and
Yeah.
then it's like client delivery. And some people might say the client comes first, but I would say if all the other stuff isn't handled, the client is not going to receive the benefit of a well organized team. So,
Yeah.
and then it's just me like figuring out, because right now I'm the business development person, I'm the one working on winning the contracts that we get. So, in the next
Hmm.
phase of MCE, we're going to start trying to figure out what does it look like if it's not just Allison working on business development. I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know when that will
Yeah.
be the reality, but that is something that I'm
The
thinking about.
goal. I mean, I love it too. And those who go back to listen to the origin story, I think another great thing is that you believe in mentors too. And so you've had mentors through the years to help you think through how you grow your company, take care of yourself, make money, save money, all the things. And I think that's also a part of like taking care of yourself, which is excellent.
Absolutely. I'm still talking to Ed, who was a score mentor I mentioned 5 years ago. It's so funny because I'm like, Ed, I know I still come and we meet. And he's like, and it's great. And I'm like, thank you, Ed. And he always still reminds me, okay, so how is this profitable? Or wait, how is that keeping you close to what it is? And I'm like, I know Ed. And so still talking to Ed. I also have a circle of friends, colleagues who are in a similar boat, like
Mm.
running a business or maybe a leader, an executive leader, and they're trying to figure out what the hell. And so just need to
Mm-hmm.
vent, share tips. That's also become a part of my community over the last 5 years. I think, I'm trying to think. Then I started doing leadership programs. I was finally able to like just say, all right, I'm going to participate in a program that's organized for entrepreneurs. So I did the Goldman Sachs 10,000
Oh
Small Business.
yeah.
Yeah, I did that in from February to May, I think. And that was a really, really, really incredible experience for so many reasons. It is a lot of work, like 20 hours a week. When they told me that at first, I was like, what? Yeah, right. But it
Whoa.
literally is between going through the curriculum, watching the modules, the meetings multiple times a week, Monday, Thursday, and Friday. It's a lot, but it helps you to remember that the challenges that you navigate as an entrepreneur are not singular to yourself. And there's
Mm-hmm.
someone else that has been through it and can offer some tips. And even though we weren't in the same field, some of us were product based, some of us were service based, we're all still navigating people management or accounting.
Mm.
And the other thing is, it was really affirming. A lot of the systems and things that I had set up, they were talking about the power of having them. And so it was affirming. And then I also enrolled in the Intercultural Leadership Institute fellowship
Oh.
program. And that is very specific to the arts and culture sector and social justice and organizing. It's valuable to have both sets of insights as a part of my psyche as I'm planning, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
thinking about how to do it from the cultural aspect while thinking about the business side of it too. I think both of them add very distinctive value. I also mentioned hiring a leadership coach,
Mm.
which was different than the SCORE mentor. And you might be like, well, why do you need a SCORE mentor and a leadership coach? Child, you need a team to support you up and through this thing. And even though
Right.
I don't talk to Ed as frequently as I did, we might talk once a quarter now. The leadership coach that I worked with, she helped me make sure that it felt like MCE.
Mm.
And so I'm very grateful to that time that I spent with her. And it was like maybe 6 months. Yeah.
No, I love it. And then, do you have a hobby with all this
Well,
time that you don't
you
have?
know, I changed my life in June when I became a fur mom. You
Yes.
might hear my little dog in the background. She's like, "What is going on?" And so I don't know. Playing with my dog is is a
We're gonna
hobby,
claim
but
it. Yes.
I love
Walking the
McNeil.
dog.
And her name is Jamila Aaliyah McNeil. We call her Mila for short, and she just is a light that has ensured that I cultivated joy in a way that I hadn't previously. Always, arts and culture is fuels me, continuing to support arts activities and go to music fest now that the world is opening up again, seeing performances, taking my
Yeah.
own dance classes and drum classes.
Yeah.
Those are hobbies. Hanging out with friends, just laughing and eating. That's important.
It
Yeah.
is. Taking that
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
And then how
Mhm.
can the listeners find you? They're like, we want to support Allison. We love Allison. Where do we
Oh.
find Allison?
Well, thank you for your desire to support me because listen, I receive it. For our business, MCE Arts, MCEARTS.com is our website. If you go on Instagram, it's MCE Arts. On Twitter, we're MCE Arts. On LinkedIn, we're McNeil Creative Enterprises, our entire name. If you're interested in seeing what I'm doing in these streets, you can go to my personal Instagram. I believe, yeah, it's open. Miss Allie T. It's MSALITEE. And yeah, I would say that's where you can find me.
Perfect. Well, Allison, thanks again for coming on the podcast. And always dropping this
Oh, thank you.
information to make us better. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
I mean, it means a lot. And I know that you are going to change some lives here with your information and help the women that are listening to this episode be
oh my
better
goodness.
leaders, better business women, just better overall. So, really appreciate it. And thank you, thank you, thank you for coming on again.
Thank you, Nache. And I appreciate the opportunity to really reflect on where I was 5 years ago. And, I just want to just share with those people who are out here trying to figure it out. Be patient with yourself, and worship is a great walk in self-awareness. Just listen to what your heart says and get clear on what your standards are, and that'll help guide so much of this walk. Shay, you have been an incredible, if you will, peer mentor in this journey of trying to stay in these entrepreneurial streets, because it takes a lot. And I just appreciate you for having this podcast and for our chats, having these chats around just what it's like to be a Black woman professional trying to navigate it all. So I'm just grateful to know you. And what's so funny is, I don't know, is when we first met, my nephew was like 2 or 3. He's 8 now.
Oh, that
And,
is
and it's
crazy.
crazy. It's crazy. Remember, you created his name for me in wood.
Yeah,
I can't
laser
remember.
cut. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so he is 8 now. It's so crazy how fast time goes. But I'm grateful to know you.
The same. Thanks, Allison.
Well, that's a wrap, people. I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I know I did. Great, great advice when it comes to growing and running a team. So, if that is the type of business you're in where you will need to hire like small teams of people, I hope that from the orientations to the retreat to all the things that you found this episode to be extremely helpful. And if you do, please comment on the show notes or the Instagram account or send me a little DM or Allison. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, remember on each episode and on the Studio 78 podcast page, you can leave me a voice message on SpeakPipe. We'd really love to hear from you. Okay, that's it, folks. Remember, the week of Thanksgiving, there's going to be a little bit of I just won't have an episode, but I'm hoping to be back that next week once I'm up and running again. So until then, remember, please rate me 5 stars on Apple. If you're listening to on YouTube, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe wherever you may be listening. And remember, sharing is caring. And check out dreamsplansideas.com if you're looking for a cool journal to help you figure out what's next. All right, take care, folks. Have a great Thanksgiving. Bye.